welcome to a brand new season of Kindred, everyone. And welcome to us celebrating our 10th season. Sister, girl, we are going to celebrate like we are middle-aged and ready for the couch at the end of the day. I can't even wait.
Excellent.
This is how we party, right?
Yes, this is how we party.
This is our celebration at the end of the day. But
Woo,
I mean,
woo.
10 seasons is very, very cool. That's the thing to celebrate. 5 years. We're 5 years old.
Yeah, that is a thing to celebrate. Absolutely.
How do you feel about being here for your 10th season?
Amazing. I feel
Don't be
so
honest.
good about it.
Thank you. Yes.
I feel honored
Oh,
and I feel humbled.
well, those are true. You're not.
That
kidding
is
about
true.
That part.
No, I'm not. I'm not. And,
Well, maybe when
yeah,
we talk to our amazing guests, you feel
that's
honored.
what I'm thinking. Yeah.
I was hoping you meant me, but that's
Oh,
okay.
I feel like, yeah, super
You're
honored.
honored. You're deeply honored.
Anytime I
Well-
get to spend an hour with you is an honor.
Oh my gosh, that is so sweet. Let's play some 70s song over that. Like,
Yeah.
amazing. Amazing. All right. So if all hell breaks loose, it's because my cat Marcus just decided to join me on my desk. So let's see how that goes, everyone. But yes, oh my gosh, seriously doing this podcast for 5 years and 10 seasons is changing my brain. I feel like we learn so much from these conversations. It's mind altering and heart expanding every time we listen to the work our guests are doing. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
changed me.
For sure. Yeah. No, I think from the very first interview we did, which I still remember,
Yes.
my mind was a little bit blown and definitely a little bit rewired.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. So thanks for being here for 10 seasons, everyone. We can't wait to keep celebrating. So just to address a little admin, we are changing our episode format a bit, and we have decided to drop the takeaways. And that's because I feel like, Jen, you and I are talking things out and highlighting what is changing our perspective so much more in real time with our guests. We just don't feel like we need the takeaway anymore.
Yeah.
So apologies if you will miss that. And if you don't, then you're welcome. So
Yeah.
I just feel like we're kind of doing it in real time.
Agreed.
And, that might be making our episodes a teeny bit, our interviews a little bit longer, but then, it's all good. We're just sort of, we're there. We've learned a lot. Also, Jen, do you think any of our listeners would like to celebrate our 10th season with buying us a cup of coffee? Would you like to tell our community how they can do that?
Well, since I don't have the little piece of paper in front of me, let's see what I've learned in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Let's
it hasn't
go
been
for
5 years that
I'm
we've
going to
had a
help
cup
you.
of coffee. We've only had a cup of coffee for 2 in my defense at the
Estimation.
most.
So go to
Yeah.
the website.
So I would have told you that. I
I'm
told you
sorry.
that before, and you told me not to say it. So I do know that. Go to our website and you scroll down to the little yellow icon that's a
Yeah.
cup of coffee, and
right.
click on Buy Me a Cup of Coffee,
Yes.
which is a one-time way to support our podcast. It's not recurring. It's just a one-time, you know what? I felt like sharing some coffee with you today. Like a happy birthday type of thing, a little like a Starbucks gift card kind of.
Yes.
And then you move on.
I
So,
love that.
and I love coffee. So,
And
if
you love your
us-
coffee. You are.
Oh man, my coffee today was
Lord
so
save us
good.
if she doesn't have it. Let me
So
tell you.
good. Well, you
Was it
should
one of your
talk
best?
about your tea. It was just so good. My machine, I have learned, makes different coffee dependent on the humidity, as my son-in-law, who's a
wild.
barista, told me. And today is very humid, but boy, did it make a tremendous cup of coffee.
That is
So
wild. Well, there you go. Coffee
So,
is critical.
think about
And
it if you want to
yes.
support us. So I did
That's our
pretty well
pitch.
considering I've never even
Nailed it.
seen it on the
Nailed
website.
it. Absolutely nailed it. Yes, it's just a little yellow cup of coffee. It's right there on the
It even is
homepage.
yellow. See, I really have been listening. I'm so proud of
I know.
myself.
You are the best. This is why we continue to renew your contract.
This
So
must
thank
be
you.
it. This must be the reason. Attention to detail.
That's right. Okay, let's go meet our guest. And I'll just add, today we are covering a really special topic, a species that has lived on this planet for millions of years. I'm talking about since the time of dinosaurs, before grass existed, before flowers were blooming. This species is just so special and is one of those few giants that still remains on this planet. And in fact, here's a little fun fact for you. They are considered living fossils because they have existed on this planet for so long. So that's very
Cool.
cool. So today we are talking about coastal redwoods and giant sequoias. I am pumped for this conversation. I can't wait to one day see them. You have been in the presence of these incredible giants. And to guide us through the ages and into these ancient groves, we have asked Ben Blom of the organization Save the Redwoods League to speak with us all about these wise and wonderful trees. So, a bit about Ben. Ben serves as the League's Director of Stewardship and Restoration and has more than 15 years of restoration and forest management experience. One of Blum's priorities and an initiative that I was really excited to hear about is the work he is doing with the Giant Sequoia Lands Coalition, which is a multi-partner collaboration dedicated to the conservation and stewardship of giant sequoia ecosystems. So this coalition is comprised of members from tribal, federal, state, and local organizations and agencies. They are also working with local conservation groups and academic research scientists in the ongoing stewardship of these amazing trees. That was really fun to hear about, right?
Yeah.
So this coalition is so important, especially in context to one of the biggest threats facing coastal redwoods and giant sequoias, which is climate driven wildfires. And this is where the leadership and the work they are doing and collaborating with tribal agencies. This is where the leadership of local tribal communities is absolutely critical, and Ben will dig into that. It's very exciting. Um, so, yeah, it was really special to hear Ben's perspective and experience, just dedicating his life to being a steward to these trees. You can feel his deep respect and reverence for these ancient species when
Hmm.
he speaks about them, and it was just such a joy for us to be in the presence of that energy. It was really
Yeah,
lovely.
definitely.
And you kind of know what he's talking about a bit more than I do because you've been there.
I actually can't believe you've never seen them.
I know.
I'm kind of surprised with all your travels, but
I know. It's
yeah,
on my list for
they
sure.
are
So, listen, this is
they're
why I need to
definitely.
live to 95. So, and just another little add-on. This season, we are doing another mini series focusing on what we are calling the gentle giants of our planet. So we are going to be highlighting 4 or 5 species that are critically important to this planet at the same time being the largest individuals or major systems on the Earth. So thus redwoods, as they are the biggest trees on Earth and are considered the most effective trees at making the biggest impact on carbon capture and storage, which I thought
Yeah,
I
that was
didn't.
crazy when he told us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not know that at all. So very exciting. Okay, thanks for being here. Please share this episode. Please rate and review us after you hear this incredible conversation. And as always, find a space or species in nature that you personally connect to and just love the heck out of it, right, sister?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for being here and see you at the Redwoods. Ben, hello and welcome to Kindred. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, would you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Sure. I'm Ben Blom. I'm the Director of Stewardship and Restoration for a nonprofit, Save the Redwoods League out here in California. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Oh, well, I will say, I wanted to speak with someone about sequoias and redwoods for a very long time. When I think of these trees, especially sequoias for some reason, I immediately think if there ever was a tree that is sentient, it must be them. I mean, they just conjure an energy of ancient wisdom and strength and knowing. And any being that has lived and experienced life on this planet in and around 300 years ish is surely a wise elder that we should be learning from and aspiring to be like. And I just merely being in their presence must be an astonishing and humbling experience. I look forward to having one day, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, I feel lucky every day. I mean, I live in the redwood forest. I work in the redwood
Wow. Oh,
forest.
wow. Wow.
I feel, yeah, I never take it for granted, to be
Yeah.
honest. It's really a special thing to be able to live and work in in these
Wow.
beautiful places and just always have that grounding
Mm.
and
Yeah.
inspiration just
Hmm.
there
Oh, yeah.
for me
Incredible.
to tap into whenever I need it. So
Yeah. Incredible.
yeah, it's really a special thing.
Well, before we learn as much as possible in this conversation about these incredible trees, I'd love to hear a bit about how you came to be the director of stewardship and restoration at Save the Redwoods League. What was the path that led you to working with sequoias and redwoods?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't probably a traditional path at all, and so I know
It's one of our
everybody's path
favorite
is
paths.
different.
Hmm.
Yeah. I grew up in Massachusetts,
Oh,
so
Okay.
wow. That's a big change. Yeah. Wow.
yeah, I grew up
Oh.
in one of the western suburbs of Boston,
Mm.
Needham, and
Okay. Okay.
I didn't know anything about redwoods, nothing about sequoias. Went through my whole high school, never having been to California. I went through college. I'd never heard about the field of forestry. It just wasn't a thing that was on my radar. Um, but I always liked being in the outdoors, whenever I had those opportunities.
Mm.
Um, and so, I think it was in my junior year in college, in upstate New York. I learned about ecology, and I had always loved science and I'd always loved being outdoors, but I had no idea that you could combine the two.
Oh,
Right.
cool. That's
Right.
kind of cool that you found that out.
Yeah, so I learned about like wildlife biology and
Yeah.
ecology and the idea that you could use science and be outside and you almost feel guilty at first, like I'm not actually like working right now. I'm
Right.
just doing something I
Right. Could
love.
I get paid for that?
Am I
Yeah.
Yeah, could
just
I?
on a
Right.
excellent walk or?
Yeah. And
That's
so I
cool.
I went to school, college, as a pre-med because I love science and I just assumed
Mm.
that's what you did. If you really like science, you would become a doctor or you do
Fair.
research in a lab.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
But by the time I was a junior or senior, I actually learned about ecology and realized I actually kind of want to explore this a little bit. And so when I graduated, I started looking for jobs where I could do science in the outdoors and kind of bounced around a little bit and moved to New Mexico for a year, doing work in southern New Mexico, kind of out in the desert. And then I found a job online just on a list serve. These are things that used to exist on the web.
Yeah.
Um, for a job in Northern California. And so
Mm.
I was working for a logging company, and I didn't know anything about this stuff. And they were looking for
Mm,
people that could do wildlife surveys. So
mm,
find sensitive wildlife and help protect them, basically set aside portions of the forest that the logging company owns
sure.
to protect their habitat. And so that was my first time driving into California, my first time in a redwood forest, and it really blew me away.
Yeah, I bet.
Mm,
Yeah. It
And
gets your attention. Yeah.
they get your
Uh-huh.
attention, and I learned what forestry was through this.
mm,
I learned, how foresters kind of manage forests for different objectives and goals,
right.
and how you can apply science. It's really an applied science,
Yeah.
Mm,
forestry. And so that, convinced me I really wanted to do this and spend more time out in these places. And so I
mm-hmm,
went back to school and got a master's in forestry, and then
mm.
kind of worked my way through different jobs. I started with the federal government. I worked
Okay.
for the federal government for
Mm-hmm.
12 years,
That makes sense.
and then landed in this job about 4 years ago. And
Mm.
it's really a dream job
Yeah,
for
I'm
me.
sure
I'm
it
a
is.
forester. I get to work in giant sequoia and coast
Right,
redwood
right, right.
forests, and
Wow.
and
Amazing.
our goal and what our mission is to protect and restore and conserve these forests
Mm.
for all of the reasons that we'll talk about today, but
Mm-hmm,
also
mm-hmm,
just for the connection that people have to these forests. So I get to be part of that, making those connections and building those
mm.
connections between the natural world and people.
Yeah,
So
that's amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And so when you drove into these, what was the moment that you were like, okay, this is where this is what I want to work with this space and these trees, like in a different sort of context when you
Yeah.
got to Save the Redwoods?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I first came to the Redwoods, I was working in a lot of places that had been previously logged and beautiful
Hmm.
places. But I remember
Yeah.
my first time seeing an old growth forest, a forest that had never been cut
Mm.
before,
Whoa.
Hmm.
in our,
Yeah, that'll do it.
more modern history.
Yeah.
And it just blew me away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it still does when you go into these places.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it
That
never
makes
gets
Yeah.
old,
sense.
like I said.
No,
It's
I
just a
get
thing
that.
Yeah.
That's
that you
amazing.
That's
feel
so
the
true.
kind of the history and
Hmm.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like you said, kind of like the wisdom of these places.
Mm. Yeah, I
And
love
it
that.
And your
really puts
place
the
on the
group together.
planet too, I think. Like
Yeah.
Mm.
the first time I went to California, we went to Muir Woods, and I just remember I was young. How old was I? Early mid 20s, and I just remember feeling sort of similarly to like when you're at the ocean, like, oh, I am such a small part of this vast universe. There's something
Mm.
about those giant, giant,
Mm.
giant trees that
Yeah.
just
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
it's
For sure.
perspective on our place here. It's like, and the sort of the respect that's demanded, I guess.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
Yeah.
you
I
can't
can
help it.
imagine. Yeah.
It's just like, oh, and the reverence. I think reverence is a word I would say that applied to my feelings of like
Mm.
this felt like holy ground, kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. So, Ben, talk to us about Save the Redwoods League. I believe this is a nonprofit established quite a long time ago, which I imagine has had its own version of growth and challenges along the way. So, what is the history of your organization and why and how did it come to be?
Yeah. Well, Save the Redwoods League has been around for over 100 years.
Oh, nice.
It was founded in 1918.
Wow.
So, a few years back, 8 years back, they celebrated the centennial of the
Hmm.
organization.
Hmm.
And, it's had a checkered history, I would say. A lot of
Sure.
conservation groups that were founded over 100 years ago
Sure.
were founded with ideologies that today we would find kind of repugnant, right?
Yeah.
So
So,
and Save the
slightly
Redwoods League,
problematic. Hmm. Sure.
yeah, has had
Sure.
a reckoning with that,
Yeah.
and not trying to hide from that.
Right.
I would say, we've really grown as an organization in the last 10 years.
Hmm.
And, when that centennial came up, the organization did kind of an unusual thing for an organization and kind of was looking back at the last 100 years, which was incredibly successful in a lot of ways in terms of setting aside a lot of the parks that we enjoy today, buying those lands, protecting them, turning them over as parks. That
Yeah.
was kind of the bread and butter of the organization for a long time and protected about 250,000 acres across California
Hmm.
in that way.
Hmm.
But there was a recognition that as we were coming up on that 100 years that we needed a new 100-year centennial vision,
Hmm.
and
Right.
that centennial vision was going to be different than what we'd done in that first 100 years.
Yeah.
Um, one of the histories and especially in the Coast Redwood range is that most of the old growth, the uncut forests in the redwoods have been cut now. So only
Hmm.
5% of that original forest it remains unlogged.
Whoa.
So that first 100 years of the organization was really about protecting those places.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so in this next 100 years, it's about protecting and restoring the other places, the places that have
Right.
been logged that may need the recognition that more active management and more stewardship is needed. And so we've really grown the restoration program at Save the Redwoods League, even in the 4 years I've been here. And it's the Coast Redwoods and Giant Sequoias and really getting our hands dirty and trying to improve forest health and improve resilience in the face of climate change.
Hmm.
And so it's really evolved as an organization over the last 10 years.
I love that because the first 100 years, of course, is going to be. I mean, that's a chunk of history in the whole United States. That is. There's lots of stuff that needs to change. And looking forward to the next
Hmm.
100 years, I love that. Like, what have we learned? How can we be different? And it is not. It's going to be a different focus. So it's great to hear that you've, especially in the last 10 years, revamped sort of that and rejuvenated and sort of let's start in a new space and from a new foundation where you've gotten to. And the restoration, I can imagine, is a big part of that So that's great to
Yeah.
hear. Okay, so let's dig into the biggest trees that exist on the planet today. Let's do a little facts segment about sequoias and redwoods. Talk to us about the differences and the similarities of sequoias and redwoods because they're not exactly the same tree. Um, how long they have existed on the planet, where are they located, and just what makes them so unique, and just, every other fact you can think of, lol. Um, should we start, at the Triassic, Jurassic period, 200 million-ish years ago?
Yeah, yeah. So, we talk about how old these individual trees are that we see now, but just from an evolutionary perspective, they're also incredibly old. And so,
Yeah.
they've been around for 200 million years. The first sequoias, in that family in the fossil record date back to the Jurassic period,
Mm,
Wow.
which was kind of the beginning of the era of the dinosaurs.
wow.
And so just to put that in perspective, that's
Yeah.
before flowering plants
Yeah.
first evolved. That's before grasses first evolved. So,
Wow.
before
Wow.
that,
It's absurd.
there were trees that looked
Yeah.
kind of similar to the redwood forests and sequoia forests that we see today.
Mm,
Um, and their range was very different. Of course, the orientation of the continents was different, right? So,
Right.
right, right, right.
Jurassic period, Pangea, that was
Pangea.
where the
Wow.
land
Yeah.
was, right? So
Wow.
Right.
there are fossil records of redwoods in places like Greenland, for example,
Wow.
Okay.
which today, of course, would not uh, be habitat for
Right.
for redwood forests, but was at some point. And so, and then over time, of course, the continents have moved through continental drift. The dinosaurs went extinct.
Right.
Flowering plants evolved. Insects came,
Wow.
came
Wow.
around, and these redwoods remain. And so, there are three species of redwoods in that family that are still around.
Okay.
Two of them are only found really in California and a small piece of Oregon.
Oh,
That's the
wild.
giant sequoia and coast redwood. And then there's a third species in metasequoia that was thought to be extinct, but was found in China,
Oh,
years ago. And you see
whoa.
these around. They're called dawn redwoods. They've been planted in a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
botanical gardens and arboretums around the world, but they were only
Wow.
found in a few places in China
Interesting.
in the
Hmm.
last century. So
Are they equally as big? Are they similar size?
they're different.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very different. So, we think of these three species as being, related to each other, and they are. They're each other's closest relatives, but they're all different. There were lots of other species in that family that have now gone extinct.
Okay.
Mm.
So these are kind of the remaining living fossils. Metasequoia or dawn redwoods are actually deciduous. So
Oh,
they
interesting.
lose their needles in the winter. They're adapted to cold climates,
Okay.
and they don't get nearly as big.
Interesting.
And so yeah, it's interesting. And giant sequoias and coast redwoods, the two that we have in California, are also very different from each other
Right.
in some really important ways.
Right. And they're different colors and they're different widths, right? So how big and tall do they grow, and how long does it take them to get? Are they just always growing, or do they actually stop at some point?
Yeah, we really think that they never stop growing.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow.
They really do. And things change. Their tops will fall off, their
Oh,
branches will fall, that things
okay.
will happen, but they persist and they survive and they're incredible survivors.
So what's like the
Um,
tallest, widest one you have out there now?
yeah, so the tallest trees in the world are coast redwoods.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they can grow to be, I think the tallest tree in the world is about 380 feet tall.
Wow.
That's up in Northern California.
How many Empire State Buildings is that? How many
That's like
stories is
38.
that?
It's 38 floors, right? Or
Yeah,
38
38 floor
stories.
building.
Like
Yeah,
you
you
think,
think
yeah.
about a
Right.
10
Oh,
story,
hello.
yeah, 10-foot
Yeah.
stories.
Just
That's
Yeah.
walk
tall.
out your skyscraper and boop, boop, boop,
Yeah,
boop down the tree.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And if
And
Wow.
you're
so
if you're standing in a redwood forest, would you see coastal redwoods? Would they be neighbors or would they be in different areas? I'm just
Oh,
yeah,
curious.
good
giant and
question.
so coast redwoods exist along the coast of California.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that they're found closer to the coast here, so in California we have what we call a Mediterranean climate where
Yeah.
we get
Mm.
most of our moisture during the winter and then we have a
Right.
dry summer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Coast redwoods are able to absorb water from coastal fog that we get here. So
Wow.
Ah.
in the summertime, we don't get rain, but we get fog.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so within that fog belt of California, we have coast redwoods.
I
And so they're
see.
able to get year-round moisture. And they even have special needles in the canopies of the trees that are adapted not for photosynthesis. They're actually adapted, we learned, to absorb water from fog.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
And so that's
So,
one of the reasons they can grow so tall.
right.
The
Yeah.
kind of the
They don't need
action,
rain.
the
Yeah.
pull and pressure gradient that you need to create to pull water from roots,
Right.
it kind of doesn't work up to 380 feet.
Ah, that's
It's
so
because they're
interesting.
gonna the lower parts gonna be like, I drank it all. Sorry, guys up
Yeah, I
top.
Yeah.
know. By the
Sorry,
time
Can't
it
get it
gets
floor
up
up there,
there.
it's
38.
Yeah.
fighting so much gravity
Yeah.
that
So
it becomes really hard.
are they
Wow.
drought resistant?
They are incredibly drought resistant,
Okay.
but still, vulnerable to drought. So
So is that
in the last
redwoods
big
and
drought we had
sequoias?
here, what was
Okay.
that?
Is it both sequoias, the coastal redwoods, not as much, but like what take like the sequoias that aren't coastal and aren't in
Yeah.
that fog?
Yeah, and so giant sequoias, on the other hand, don't live near the coast. They live just on the western slope of the Sierra Nevada. So, in
Right.
California, we have the coastal mountains, we have the
Mm-hmm.
Central Valley,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have the Sierra Nevada. So, on the western side of that Sierra Nevada, in a specific elevation gradient, we have these pockets of giant sequoia groves across the western Sierra Nevada.
Okay,
Mm.
And
so they
they're-
don't grow together.
no,
Redwoods
they
and
don't grow
okay,
together. Yeah, yeah,
interesting.
they're
Okay.
separated
Okay.
pretty pretty significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they're adapted to a very different, there's also that same Mediterranean climate where you get moisture in the winter, but a lot of that moisture in where the giant sequoias live comes in the form of snow.
Right.
Uh,
Uh
and then in the summer,
Ooh,
they
that's
don't
probably
get really
yeah.
they don't get any
Right.
precipitation. So
So where do they? So if
their
you don't have a
adaptations
good
are different.
yeah, and if you don't have a good snowfall, let's say and there is a drought, and California's been having some heavy duty droughts, where are they getting their water from?
Yeah. And so that's something that's really interesting because, we had what we would consider in California like a once in a thousand year drought just
Mm,
about a decade ago. So from
right.
about 2012 to 2016, we had a really a significant drought here.
Mm.
And in the Sierra Nevada, that place where the giant sequoias grow, we had millions of trees dying.
oh
Oh
man.
no.
But giant sequoias were not. And so there was always there
Interesting.
was this
Really?
interesting thing where, what I think we learned is that giant sequoias are tapping into sources of water that other species are not.
Yeah.
Oh,
And they don't have very deep roots, but
okay.
their ability to live as long as they do, potentially they're tapping into water in bedrock
Oh,
that other species can't tap into.
oh wow.
They're also just happen to be found, and now this isn't a coincidence, but they're found in places where they have access to year-round water.
Well,
So,
sure. Okay, that makes sense
at
for a
some
very
point,
long time.
yeah, giant sequoias existed across a much bigger geographic area, but
Okay.
now they're confined to about 94 specific spots, and they're not actually connected to each other
Mm.
geographically. But we think that, part of the reason that they exist in those spots is because they have access to year-round water and can
Okay.
survive through these drought periods that we have.
Okay. And when you say 94 specific spots, do you mean like groves, like groves of these sequoias type idea? Okay.
Yeah, so we use the term grove to, where we have naturally occurring giant sequoias,
Mm.
more than one. There are a few places where we have an individual giant sequoia growing kind of in
Aw,
isolation.
lonely,
Interesting.
lonely
And
lady.
so, and these groves are different. So, the smallest groves are just like a handful of trees, of giant sequoia trees in this larger forest.
Right.
But then we have other groves where there's thousands, of giant sequoias. And so it really varies, but there's only 94 of them of these groves across the
Wow.
Right,
state.
right.
And they're only across, about 26,000 acres, which is really not a lot of acreage.
No.
And so, coast redwoods occur across a much wider range.
Okay.
And so, just geographically, they're very distinct.
Mm.
And does that mean there are more redwoods than sequoias?
Yeah, there's more coast redwoods than there are
Yeah.
giant sequoias, both in
Okay.
terms of
Okay.
acreage and in terms of
Yeah.
individuals.
Actual numbers.
That makes
Okay.
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And the other big difference between the two species that's really important is that, giant sequoias, like a lot of conifers or other trees, they reproduce sexually primarily, right, through cones.
Right.
And coast redwoods primarily reproduce asexually. so they resprout. So if you cut a
Hmm.
giant sequoia down, you get what's called a fairy ring around the original tree.
Oh,
Oh,
So it resprouts from that root system or from the stump itself and
oh,
forms a ring of new trees that are from the same root system. Giant
oh my
sequoias don't
gosh.
do that. And so it makes a big difference in terms of how you manage them
Yeah,
when one resprouts and one does not. It's really rare actually for a conifer species like pines,
right.
these other cedars, they do not resprout.
right.
Giant sequoia, I mean, coast redwoods are really unique in that sense.
Yeah,
That's
that's
wild. So
interesting.
wait,
Yeah,
so
that
let's say
is.
you're dating the age of a a redwood, right? That's what we're talking
Yeah,
about. So you cut that down and you're like, well, that tree lives like 1,000 years, let's say. But
yeah.
but the root system is there a difference between the age of the tree and the root system? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really hard to measure, right? Like usually we measure trees with tree rings.
Right.
Right. But what
Uh-huh.
about root
So you
system?
could
The root
measure the
system just
stump
doesn't
sprout
end.
and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could see how old that sprout was, but
Right.
the root system could be thousands of years old.
Wow.
That is
Um,
wild.
That
I
is wild.
never even, well, I
That's
didn't,
got
of
to be
course, knew that.
unique to them.
Yeah.
Is that unique?
Yeah. Dude.
it's pretty unique. I mean, there
Yeah.
are there are like oaks, these other
Right.
species as
Yeah, but
Hardwoods
well,
like
that
you're
do that.
saying,
Yeah.
but
not
they don't
Right.
live as
conifers
long,
though.
right?
Right.
Right.
So
Hmm.
Right.
And
it is pretty unique.
they're not conifers. Yeah.
Right.
Which
Yeah, they're
is,
not conifers. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
Yeah.
because otherwise Christmas tree farms would be really bummed out. They just keep growing. They would, or maybe happy. I don't know.
Yeah.
You
Happy. They
cut it
just
down, it
have
grows
millions
back
of trees.
suddenly
Yeah. They would be
Yeah.
happy,
times
I think.
10 with
Yeah.
a fairy ring. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, these
That's
things are
cool.
too
They're pretty
magical.
magical. Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
So, so what is like the reciprocal relationship, or I guess the what are like let's say sequoias? What are they? What's their role in the ecosystem that they
Mhm.
live in? Like, what reciprocal relationships do they have with everyone else around them?
Yeah. So, I mean, both redwood species, I mean, there's things that are different about them. Like we've talked about some of them. One of the other things that's really unique about these redwood forests, and when we say redwood, sometimes in California, we talk about both species
Right.
actually,
Yeah.
Fair.
Right.
Yes.
is that they store more carbon than any forest in the world. So more than the
Mm.
Amazon, more than the Congo, these
Whoa.
places where we kind of think about incredibly dense forests. Um, if you look at the amount of carbon that's stored above the ground in these forests, it blows those other forests out of the park.
And they're
And
so much
coast redwoods are
smaller.
even way higher than giant sequoias. So coast
Wow.
redwoods
Wow.
store more carbon by far than any forest in the world. Giant sequoias are second,
Wow.
but there's a pretty big gap between the two.
That's incredible.
Okay.
Um,
Comparing that to the Amazon, which is many, many, many times bigger than this space you're talking about, and they're that much more important. They're playing that role even higher. That's incredible.
yeah. So we think about things like, natural solutions to climate change, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
these
Yeah.
forests store incredible amounts of carbon and they also sequester, so pull carbon from the atmosphere
Yeah.
and store it in stable forms at an incredibly high rate. So
Wow.
we think about them from that perspective. They also, when you go into these forests, they kind of create their own weather a little bit, right? So there's a feeling you get when you walk into a coast redwood forest that's really unique. And because of the massive size of these trees, they're actually able to like release water and over time and kind of meter out that water input into the system. So they're really unique in that sense. And the amount of needles that are on these trees, they're producing a lot of oxygen,
Yeah.
right? So
Wow.
so they're really cleaning our air, cleaning
Wow.
our water, cleaning our air.
That you can
There's
almost feel, you almost or can experience it when you're in there. It's like its own little subclimate.
Yeah, yeah, they kind of create their own weather. Yeah, it's kind of wild.
Wow.
And
But
oxygen rich. Maybe that's why partly you feel so good in there. It's like
yeah,
it's full of. It's
Yeah.
like wow, this is
you're like
amazing.
you're like
Uh,
breathing in that
yeah,
that
all
dense
that
oxygen. Yeah,
pure
it's
oxygen. Yeah, wow.
yeah,
Well, not pure,
From a
but yes, dense.
3,000-year
Yeah,
old
yeah,
tree.
yeah.
Hello?
yeah. And giant
Wow.
sequoias, so they exist in these pockets across the Sierra Nevada. Um, and they're really like refugia for some species because we've had a lot of fire in the
Yeah.
Sierra Nevada after a century of basically excluding all fire. We've had
Right.
a lot of fire in the last 10 years.
Right.
And in
Right.
fact, those fires were so extreme that a species like giant sequoia, that's actually, we used to consider it kind of like like invulnerable to
Yeah.
fire.
Like
We've
fire
lost about
resistant. Yeah.
20% of all of
Oh,
those old giant sequoias in a
Mm,
10-year period.
wow.
20% in
And
10
so,
years.
yeah,
That's
it,
astonishing.
so until about 10 years ago, we didn't even think they could die from fire.
Right.
Wow.
And so we've really created kind of like a novel experiment here where fire has always been part of these systems. And when you pull it out
Right.
and become really good and effective at stopping fires as we were for a while, it really changes that relationship.
Hmm.
And so, fire and sequoias have always existed together. And then when you pull that fire out, it changes that relationship where fire goes from being kind of a healthy, rejuvenating force for giant sequoias to being a destructive force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And by the time the dust settled on some of these really destructive fires, like I said, we've lost close to 20% of all of these mature sequoias. And so
Wow.
it's really a wake-up call
Yeah, for
for
sure. For
those of us
sure.
that really care about these places.
Yeah.
And
So even backing up a little bit, like
yeah,
before, let's say colonial, like we landed on this continent and cut a bunch of trees down. Why have they been able to survive and thrive for so long? What's their secret here?
yeah. Well, like a lot of the first, European accounts of coming into these forests, they used words like primeval,
Hmm.
virgin, untouched. But the reality was these places had been managed for thousands of years by indigenous peoples, and
Yeah. Right.
the forests
Right
that
on.
they came
Hmm.
into were managed forests.
Hmm.
They were people's homes. They were people's, considered their ancestors,
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
natural world.
Right. So that's
And
another
so
reciprocal human to tree relationship for
exactly,
millennia. Since humans have been there, they've been, stewards of those forests for that long. That's incredible.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, we've changed the way we talk about this, right? So
Hmm.
as an
Hmm.
organization, we used to use those words like primeval,
Hmm.
virgin,
Hmm.
untouched when we talked about these forests, just like somebody like John Muir did,
Hmm.
Yeah.
back.
Right.
They're not.
No.
These
Yeah.
these are not
Absolutely.
places these were places that people lived in for
Yeah.
Right. Right.
thousands of years. And so those initial, pictures you have of people going into these forests are like going into someone's garden, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Right.
And so, there's stories of people in the Sierra Nevada, you'd be able to ride from Bakersfield on a horse all the way to Sacramento and not have to get off your horse, because fire was just constantly, part of this system,
Hmm.
clearing out the forest, reducing forest density. And when you stop that natural process from
Hmm.
happening and you remove indigenous people from these lands and actually outlaw their
Yes.
practices that
Yeah.
Yes.
created
Yes.
these
Yes.
conditions,
Oh yeah.
the forests change
Yep.
along with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. And we've
Yeah.
talked about
And
this many
We
times
have.
on the
Yeah. We've
podcast.
talked to some people about that fire management and just
Mismanagement. Yeah.
how well it works, and
Right.
that I
yeah,
think we're starting to actually finally appreciate that, which is good
yeah,
because
Yeah.
yeah, they kind of knew what they were doing.
They
yeah.
sure
And they
did.
still do. And so
They
we
still
work a
do.
No,
lot
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
guides
Right.
Which
now.
is
Right. Right.
great, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
I think the hopeful part is that if we can I love that collaborating and having Western science and indigenous science work together. I think that's where I get hopeful about the future. Like it doesn't have to all go to hell in a handbasket. It's like
yeah,
if we could use all the knowledge, I
Yeah.
think that's going to be helpful
Oh,
because
absolutely. It's the
you
only
know
way
a lot
forward. It's
too,
the
but
only way
we
forward.
don't, yeah,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
haven't been doing it for
We sure
millions of
haven't.
years.
Like
So,
five
yeah.
seconds, and we've done it
Yeah.
so badly on a lot of
yeah,
times. So,
yeah.
so yeah, Ben, now that we have a sense of these incredible trees, I want to dig into the challenges sequoias and redwoods are facing in the modern world now. In the face of years of industrial logging, rapidly changing climates, long and intense fire seasons, like we've touched on, how are you in Save the Redwoods managing and navigating these challenges through restoration, preservation, and stewardship?
Yeah, so and I'll start with the giant sequoias because there's kind of unique challenges to both systems.
Yeah,
Giant sequoias are the ones that we are, have been most concerned about because of that recent fire history. So,
right,
you know, just to kind of set things in perspective, so we had that, you know, really once in a thousand year drought, right? 2012, 2016,
right,
and millions of trees dying across the Sierra Nevada. Of course, the giant sequoias themselves generally weren't dying as a result of the drought, but now you have these forests with millions of dead trees in them.
Yeah.
They're also overly dense. So
Mm-hmm.
we've had, nearly a century at that point of fire suppression. So, an order of magnitude more trees than existed, 100 years ago. So, when I
Woo.
talk to people about this, they think the answer to our forest problems is to plant more trees. And in some cases, we do need to plant,
Hmm.
but uh, the issue is not the number of trees.
Right,
It's
Right.
really the kind of forest that we have, and it's really
right.
a quality over quantity
Yeah.
Ooh, and like,
issue.
here's
And
it's
so,
just this
uh,
tinderbox just waiting, right?
yeah, and so yeah, no, so now you combine this the millions of dead trees, overly dense forests, where we have accumulations of fuel on the ground as
Yeah.
well.
Mm,
Fire comes through these places. I mean, in California, fire is as inevitable as rain.
right.
Yeah.
So I tell people
Yeah.
that like you're not. It's not about
When,
if the fire is going to
right.
happen.
Yeah.
It's about how the fire. It's about the characteristics of the fire. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you want it to be a catastrophic,
Yeah.
destructive fire, or do you want
Right.
it to be a low intensity, healthy fire?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the question we should be giving,
Yes.
thinking about
Right.
as opposed to
Right.
if
You're not
we're
going to
going to have
eradicate
fire.
fire. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you
Nor
can't
should we,
eradicate
right?
fire.
No,
Yeah, right,
not
right.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in giant sequoias, they're adapted to what we think of as like a mosaic of fire, where you have a
Mm,
mix of different intensities. You may have a patch of hotter fire that opens up the forest floor. Giant sequoia cones open as a result of that fire. They land in that patch, and you create a new, we call them like a cohort of giant sequoias.
Yeah.
Um,
mm,
but in the rest of the forest, it's usually like a low to moderate intensity fire, and that's the kind of patchwork of fire that giant sequoias evolved with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you go from that to kind of homogenizing the forest to where it becomes this overly dense tinderbox, like we talked about,
right,
the resulting fire that we get is entire landscapes of high intensity fire.
Yeah.
right,
And giant sequoias are not adapted to that. So they don't
Yeah.
resprout like coast redwoods.
right.
Mm-hmm.
They take a long time to become mature to produce cones. So, we don't think of a giant sequoia as being fully mature until they're around like 150 years.
Hmm.
Wow.
And so if you
They don't
lose,
produce cones for 150 years?
they'll produce cones, but they kind of take a strategy of producing a lot. They need to produce a lot of seed to create a new grove.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you think of like, when you get to a giant sequoia grove that's been managed with healthy fire, you'll see these kind of like carpets of giant sequoias growing
Mm.
in patches. So you'll
Mm.
see a clump of redwoods, I mean of giant sequoias or Sierra redwoods, and then you'll see these carpets of giant sequoia adjacent to them. So
It's like
after
a
that fire,
nursery.
yeah, kind of like that. And then over time, they die and they thin themselves out,
Okay.
usually with fire as being
Right.
that driving influence. Um, but if you lose that seed source, you could have that pulse of fire. So in some cases, the fire wasn't so intense that they lost all of their cones. They may seed into that
Hmm.
high severity fire, but now you're not getting those additional pulses for that 150 years
Wow.
to come, right? So those young sequoias in that first, 10, 15 years are really vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of
And so
course.
and so we're coming into this landscape now, I'd say in about 2021 was when people really, we had another couple incredibly destructive fires in giant sequoias, and so kind of a coalition of all the people that manage giant sequoias came together, and we created something called the Giant Sequoia Lands Coalition,
Mm.
which is basically all the land managers of giant sequoias. So it
Mm.
includes agencies, it includes tribes, it includes ourselves, other partners that really care about giant sequoias. And the hopeful thing is that, as a coalition, we really understand what the issue is.
Right,
Like, we
right.
know climate change is this influence that we're increasingly having to deal with. But I would say the main drivers of these losses of giant sequoias was mismanagement.
Yeah.
And we know that bringing good fire back into these places and changing that relationship back to a healthy fire to sequoias relationship
Right.
was critical. And
Yeah.
so over the last few years, we've really stepped up as a coalition and ourselves as
Mm.
an organization too.
Mm-hmm.
We've really built out our whole crew of people that are working in these places, working in tandem with tribal partners and others. And so we've really kind of shifted I think, the trajectory that we're on, and
Yeah.
hopefully setting these forests up for a better future.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it sounds like collaboration has kind of been the segue to real preservation and then on into stewardship as well through this coalition and collaboration and council.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And across that, there's 11 primary partners in this coalition.
Hmm.
Um, each one has kind of a different take on what they're doing, but we're all working towards the same goal
Right,
of long-term stewardship and care for these places with fire primarily as that
right.
long-term
Yeah, and
tool that we're going to
and
be
the
using.
indigenous communities have that knowledge and science, that fire science.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
how often do you meet as a coalition to talk about these things? Is it
Yeah.
yearly you get together, or is it a constant communication? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so we as Save the Redwoods League, we're kind of a unique organization in that our mission is focused on these species, right? So
right,
we're kind of
right.
the only nonprofit that covers the whole range of giant sequoias, for example. So we work with a lot of other partners like Yosemite Conservancy,
Okay.
Sequoia Parks Conservancy. They're focused in specific parts of the range.
Right.
And then we're kind of
The
I would say,
broader.
like the backbone that
Yeah.
pulls everyone together. So
Hmm.
we meet frequently, every couple weeks
Oh, that's great.
at kind of the leadership level. And then
Hmm.
we all get together in person at the same time once a year. And that's coming up next month in
Oh,
March.
nice. Okay.
Um,
Amazing.
and the purpose of that is really to bring everyone together. We bring scientists in, we talk about the latest science and things that we're learning about giant sequoias. Are there new threats that we need to be concerned about?
Yeah.
Right.
Is there research coming out about the work that we're doing where we may want to tweak our
Right.
practices?
I was
Um,
gonna ask about that. Like, do you have ongoing research that gives you data that you can feel like we're getting warmer,
yeah,
like
yeah,
moving in the right direction? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. We've even created something we're calling a dashboard, which where we're kind of like, every year we're updating that, and that kind
Right.
of helps us assess like the most vulnerable groves.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and so we bring the scientists together, we bring the tribal partners, we bring the practitioners like the burn bosses, the
Hmm.
Hmm.
the um the
I love that.
foresters like
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
myself, and so we all get together once a year. We also bring in our communications folks because one of the main roles of this coalition is to kind of scream from the mountaintops about,
Yeah, sure.
giant sequoias and the
Hmm.
importance of the work that we're doing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we all get together once a year,
Love it.
have a good time, talk about science, and then try to get out in the field together.
Hmm.
Um, and then, our role is that kind of backbone. I see it as kind of like being able to get the people and the money in the right place at the right
Right.
Right,
time
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
to get the work to happen. It's still
Yeah.
challenging to do prescribed burning,
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
for sure,
example.
for sure. Well, that's a
It's still challenging for tribes to be able to do
yeah.
their traditional
Yes.
practices in
Uh-huh.
Well,
places.
Yeah.
just mentioning prescribed burning, I was going to ask you to give me an example of what does like in action, what does preservation of the trees look like with like maybe fire prevention? Like give me an example of out there in the field. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, in the wake of these fires, we've had to do a lot of cleanup, I would say.
Okay.
Kind of, so like, and like one of the groves that we as Save the Redwoods League own and manage, it's called Alder Creek Grove,
Okay.
and it's a beautiful grove, kind of on the southern end of the Sequoia Range. The Castle Fire burned through
Mm,
that grove in 2020.
mm-hmm.
A portion of that grove burned at really high severity, and just as a
Right.
result of kind of luck, a portion of the grove didn't burn at high severity and burned at kind of low
Okay.
severity. So we were pretty lucky there.
Okay.
We had acquired the property only 6 months before it
Oh,
Oh,
burned.
wow.
wow. Oh,
Plans
gee whiz.
underway to do a bunch of work there, but
Oh,
we
man.
we really didn't even have time to put those into place.
Wow.
Um, and so what we've done, in that high severity area where we've lost our seed source now.
Hmm.
We had to
Yeah.
clear away a lot of that dead material. We planted about 50,000 seedlings in there.
Okay.
We've set up some experiments in there too with our university partners to kind of, use it as a living laboratory.
Right.
And then on the portion of the property that burned at low severity, we've been doing a lot of thinning work, trying to reduce the density of the forest in there. And now we're at the point where we can bring good fire back in. So
Hmm.
we've
Okay.
now had 4 cultural burns out there with our tribal partners.
Amazing.
And we've also done our first broadcast burn out there. And so we think of it,
Hmm.
I'm not the best person to do this because I'm not an indigenous person, but there's a difference between cultural fire and prescribed fire.
Yeah.
Right.
That's really important. And
Hmm.
cultural fire is just like it's in the word there, it's also about culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
these cultural
Absolutely.
fires that we do are led by tribal
Hmm.
people, and they
That's
are a
amazing.
big part of this kind of bringing good fire back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then we also
Absolutely.
have portions of the property where we're doing more kind of like traditional broadcast burn, where with a regular burn plan and engines and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So
And
Yeah,
that's a
right.
we're doing
broadcast
both. We're
burn.
kind
I
of
got you.
merging those
Okay.
two things, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
Western fire approach, which is
Yeah.
which can be good fire too, and then
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
the
Right.
traditional approach.
So,
So we're
inter
we're seeing that as kind of like the way forward. So
okay.
continuing to burn and
Hmm.
continuing to bring good
Yeah.
fire back into these
Healthy.
places once we've
Yes.
we've set them up for success.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So then, like, as far as like, are there protection practices you have in place? And when you and I chatted before, you mentioned tourism, and I had not thought about that. And, we all like to go out there, and these trees are, I don't know, how wide is a tree?
very wide.
Let's
Yeah,
Very,
huge.
very
how
wide.
many feet? 300 feet
We'd
wide
need 10 of us
around?
to
No,
get
not
around one, probably.
I
Yeah.
mean, like
Right.
Yeah,
10,
yeah. I mean,
20
so on
people?
that property, we have one of the biggest trees in the world, and we think it's over 3,000 years old.
Hmm.
And it would probably take about, I don't know, 20 to 30 of us to
Right,
to
to get
hold hands
around.
around it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so you think of like, and I'd never registered, but thinking about tourism, what does the impact of tourism make on these trees? Because you were saying what happens is everyone kind of comes around and people are walking around the trees a lot and
Yeah.
walking around, of course, and they want to touch them and they want to be close to them. But it packs down the earth
Compaction, yeah.
around them. And it's not, I just never thought about tourism as maybe a
Yeah.
negative impact on as far as protection goes.
Yeah, I don't I think it's so important for people to get out and experience these places. I don't worry too much about
Okay.
that. There are certain
Okay.
places within the Giant Sequoia range,
Okay.
like we're the largest tree in the world, General Sherman, which is kind of a named tree in Sequoia National Park.
Okay.
That's a tree that, hundreds of thousands of people visit every year, and the
Hmm.
Park Service has done a lot of work to set that up in a way to where people aren't going to damage the tree when they
Yeah.
go
Right.
visit it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say that's probably the impact is probably less negative than the positive effect of people
Mm,
being in
yeah.
relationship with these trees,
Fair.
because that's when they care
yeah.
about them. If
Yeah.
they see
Right.
them,
Right. Right.
they
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
That
So a
makes
couple
sense.
years ago, for example, General Sherman is known around the world as the largest tree in the world by volume.
Mm.
And we did a whole media event out there where we had some tree climbers come out who did what we called a health check
Mm,
on the tree. They went up looking at signs of insects, how is the tree doing? It's kind of like a checkup that you would
Yeah.
do, a
Get your
medical
a wellness
stethoscope
checkup,
visit.
out.
Yeah,
a
right.
wellness visit.
The little
Yeah.
thing where
And
you tap
so
their knee and see how it
Yeah,
responds. Ding,
exactly.
ding.
exactly.
Mhm.
And so then these folks came down out of the tree and we did a whole press conference like, how is the tree? Is it
Nice.
happy?
Yeah.
Is it healthy?
Yeah.
And it was an opportunity for people to learn. It was fun. It kind of this news story went all the way around the world. It was in Korea, it was in Asia, it was all
Yeah.
That's
over the place
great.
because people love this idea of these trees as kind of like we think of them as these incredibly strong, resilient things, but that there's also vulnerability there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And so I agree that I think that the human connection piece is so important.
Hmm.
And that the biggest threat to these species could come from people not caring, right?
Right, right, right.
And
And can
just
like and that's another
yeah.
part of mismanagement, right?
I
Like
have
the,
a
Yeah.
the
yeah.
general. Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
I just have a question. I just was thinking, like, we have a giant oak tree in my yard that every few years I have to get somebody to come and check that this limb where it got struck by lightning is still like this is are you guys that involved in trees? Like if a 1,000-year-old tree loses a limb, is that going
Yeah.
to be problematic, or do you just let them kind of hang
Yeah.
out?
We kind of let them hang out. I mean,
Okay.
there are specific trees like General Sherman, where it's this iconic tree. People
Yeah.
come from all over the world to see it, like where we did this health check. But typically, we're working at larger scales, and
Yeah.
so
Mm,
we're more concerned about the forest health as
Right. You don't
opposed to like
I guess you
individual
really wouldn't
trees.
have time to
okay,
check
that
every
makes
tree.
sense.
Yeah.
And one thing
Well,
that
I'm
you
sure
notice
though
about
there's
these
yeah.
these giant sequoias, which I think is so amazing when you walk through them, is each tree is different, right? They kind of have
Mm,
their own shape, their
for
own
sure.
Yeah.
feeling, and that's
Yeah.
from thousands of years of fires, of droughts, of
Hmm.
windstorms that
Right.
knock over the top, and now it's got a new branch that's creating a new top, and that habitat complexity is also important for wildlife. So,
Yeah.
for
That's
Huge.
example,
true.
like spotted owl, will
Right.
nest in one of those cavities
Yeah. They like,
that
yeah.
that's formed by that dead branch.
Yep.
So
Right.
we're
Hmm.
working kind of at that forest level as opposed to
Hmm.
like the individual tree level.
Yeah, that makes
That's
sense.
Yeah.
incredible. That's amazing.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. Just
And
thinking about
you asked also about protection, and so one of the things that we are always thinking about is because we're working in these really heavily burned landscapes. A lot of times these giant sequoia grows, even though they've also burned in some cases at high severity, they're the greenest part of the forest that remains.
mm,
And
Interesting.
some of that is just because they're growing in these wetter spots,
hmm
where they've been able to persist for thousands of years, right?
right.
So, um, the result of that is that some of the species that we're most concerned about that rely on these older, bigger forests are now flocking to these places as kind of
Yeah.
like refugia, right? So,
Yeah.
Right.
we also are, concerned about them. And so, we always do wildlife surveys, for example, before we're doing our work, to make sure that, we can work outside of nesting seasons where we're not
Yeah.
going to impact these species because, like I said, they're kind of like islands of good habitat, surrounded by, a kind of degraded habitat. And
Right.
so,
Hmm.
yeah, that's something that we're concerned about. There's species like the fisher and California spotted owl that are, either on the endangered species list or soon will be
Yeah.
because of
Mm,
the fires that we've had in the last 10 years. And so
Hmm.
these
right.
last green kind of oases for them are really important. Um,
Wow. And these big old trees are
so
like, I'm going to try to hold you and support you the best we can, but
yeah,
there aren't that many of us,
Yeah.
folks.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing. I hadn't even thought about that. That's
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah.
Right. The sort of the influx and deluge of can that, can they support each other in a
Mhm.
in a healthy way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. So, Ben, I'd like to shift a bit and just spend a few minutes in the forest among these gentle giants. When you catch yourself in a quiet moment with them, I imagine a sense of awe and magic is present, and you've talked about that. What must it be like to be standing at the foot of these trees that have been living for centuries, a species existing through the ages in that very space?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very humbling, I would say. I mean, it really puts things in perspective.
Hmm.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on in the world that's really scary and dark right now. And um, you know, it, you think about what these trees have lived through,
Yeah.
you
Right.
um, and the things that they've witnessed and
Hmm.
survived. I mean, we're talking hundreds of fires in this one tree's lifetime, hundreds of storms, droughts, lightning strikes, snowstorms, blizzards, deluges of rain, whatever. Uh,
Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, these. it puts things in perspective,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Hmm.
um, but it also, I think I just feel an incredible responsibility as
Mm.
somebody that has these understands the tools that we need to use and sometimes I think about our responsibility in this moment in time, which is like a really unique
Hmm.
place to be in, and it does feel like a responsibility, not just to the forest, but to the people, that are going to want to experience this in 100 years.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen with AI in the next 5 years, but hopefully these trees will still be there and somebody will be able to unplug and come out here and
Yes.
feel that same feeling. So I,
Right.
I,
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
I
yeah.
feel a bit, like this incredible sense of responsibility,
Mm.
um, and yeah, kind of humility
I love that. Yeah,
in their presence. So
Well, that's
can
very
imagine.
lucky for people like us because I mean, I'm really grateful that you do have that sense of responsibility because it's
Mm.
almost like I think they can be a reflection of we can survive difficult challenges and, and almost like their elders, you can sort of go to for, advice. Like, okay, you guys have lived
Absolutely.
through a lot of hard things and you're still here.
Hmm.
And, that idea that we need to keep adapting, right? And keep being open to changing and things like that. There's a lot of lessons we can
Yeah,
yeah.
learn from that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
Hmm.
lovely.
Well, it's great that you do what you do because it's
Hmm.
fantastic, and the fact that this organization's been around so long and is willing to evolve and adapt and
Mm.
shift for what's needed is
Yeah.
also very cool to me.
Yeah.
That you're that humility. It's like this isn't working the same way anymore, so we need to shift gears and come along with what we know now we need to do. That's
Yeah.
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, Ben, I'm thinking about our last question to you, and one we ask all
Mhm.
our guests. Why is this conversation so important? And I think we're here talking about it already, but I'm thinking about it in context of what would the impact be to our planet if we lost these ancient, massive, and critical contributors to our worlds? Why is this? Why are they so important?
Yeah. I mean, there's like kind of the response to that that's kind of like the science and technical side of carbon sequestration and
Hmm. Sure,
wildlife habitat
sure.
and then there's also the um just the human side of it and the spirituality kind of side of it.
Hmm.
um we lose that connection to these magical places. We can't bring it back, right? And
Hmm.
so I think we exist as part of nature, as part of these systems. um for some of our indigenous partners that we work with, they're like ancestors.
Yeah.
You can't lose that connection and still retain your culture and kind of the spirituality that you've developed over thousands of years. So um, I think they're incredibly important just from both sides. It's like
Yeah.
the science-driven kind of Western view side, the kind of utilitarian side that we often default to, but also from the spirituality and kind of human connection side.
Hmm.
um, it's incredibly important. And we kind of take for granted the fact that these places exist in our country, right? Like in
Right,
Hmm.
right.
California,
Yeah.
we
Right.
have
Yes.
the largest and oldest
Yeah.
and tallest trees in the
Yeah.
world in one place. It's really unique.
Right. Talk about national treasures. My
Yeah.
Yeah,
goodness.
Right.
national
How
treasures, like
lucky.
what we've inherited
Hmm.
with these places is really special, and we certainly don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
Um, and so,
Yeah.
I think there's so many ways you could go at that question. Why is it important? But that's
Yeah.
the one
Well, I
that
love your
I keep
answer.
going back to just because um, I think it's universal. Anybody that walks into one of these places, if you walk away not feeling that sense of awe, um, I don't know.
Maybe
Something's
check
going
yourself in
on.
somewhere. Yeah, right.
Check yourself for a
in
pulse.
Yeah, I think you're in a bad way if that's what
Just check your
happens.
pulse, right? I mean,
Something's wrong.
absolutely.
Yeah, something's very wrong.
No, I love that. And carbon what is that? Carbon
Sequestration.
Sequestration.
sequestration. Thank you. So important. And also, I loved what you said about just the treasures that they are, and what would we be without them. And after sitting here with you and Jen in this conversation, it's hard not to get emotional. It feels like it goes right to the heart. And words like reverence, I think, Jen, you mentioned that word earlier, and respect and sacred come to mind. I think species like these trees that exist in all their glory and magnificence and bear the scars of 1,000+ years that's the only reasons we need to work tirelessly in restoring and preserving them and acting as stewards to them. And like Jen said, we are so grateful for the people like you and organizations like Save The Redwoods League that dedicate their careers to doing just that. Just a deep reverence and gratitude and deep bow to you and the stewards and the people, your coalition that has come together in reverence for this incredible species that has just lived. And I don't mean singular trees. I know they're not millions of years old, but just a species that has survived for this long, just inherently deserves that depth of respect. So Ben, where can we find more information about the league, and how can we support you?
Well, savetheredwoods.org
Okay.
is our website, and there's a lot of information there about all the different projects and things that we do. We also have a social media presence.
Okay.
So look us up on Instagram and
Okay.
Facebook, and
I will.
we have a TikTok, all those places.
Woo, okay. I'll leave that to you.
So that's one, to connect more with the organization, that would be one place.
Okay.
And there's definitely opportunities to donate.
Great.
Good.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
all
that's
of
good
those
too.
places.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And yeah, just become tuned into the work that we're doing,
Right.
and become champions for the Redwoods, just like we are. And
Okay.
I think that would be and come visit.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I am coming.
I got to
I'm
get
coming.
my sister out there. Yeah, it is
Coming to
something. Yeah.
Sequoia HQ, please.
Yeah.
Well, Ben,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining us today and talking about one of our biggest and most important species on Earth. And it's so funny because this is our season. This is our 10th year. No, our 10th season anniversary and our 5th year. And it's just so funny to think about, 5 years, big deal. And 10th season, it is a big deal to us, but we're just like a speck of dust on the bark of a sequoia. I mean, it doesn't even compare.
Right, exactly.
But listen, thank you for this conversation. And it's a great way for us to celebrate our milestone. So be well. And thanks for the conversation.
Yeah.
And best of luck to all of those incredible sentient trees out there.
Well, thank you for having me.
Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen, produced by Kat Gaddy and myself, sound production and editing by Dan Cooper, original music by Ellie Grace, and our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website at kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find details about Kindred Plus, our subscription service, as well as links to our social media accounts and show notes.